how did everything go so wrong? Diablo 2 started it perfect 23 years ago with the Summoner Necromancer. Now in Diablo 4, it's quite the lackluster. You can play it, but it's just an absolute hassle to play the Summoner Necro. And let's be real, a Necromancer is supposed to be the master of the dead, summoner of skeletons, golems, armies, having around you and pummeling your opponents. That ain't happening in Diablo 4, which made me go back to Diablo 3, which is only 6 years ago when the Necromancer got a DLC released there. Was the Diablo 3 Necro so bad that they just simply didn't know how to make it work in Diablo 4? The sad truth being here, even if they just simply copied the homework of Diablo 3, the Diablo 4 Necro would be so much better. So what did they actually do to make the Diablo 3 Necro so good? And what does Diablo 4 need to learn from this ASAP? I recently played through the complete Diablo 3 journey again in 6 hours, and I've never played the D3 Necro before, and let me tell you, it was the best Diablo experience I've had to date. Let's start with the main skeleton skill, Command Skeleton. Active, command your skeleton minions to attack the target and increase their damage against it by 50%. That's already plenty good. This is completely missing in Diablo 4. There's no way in any way to command your skeletons to do something. And then the passive is raise skeletons from the ground every 2 seconds to a max of 7 skeletons. Skeleton minions deal 50% weapon damage as physical per attack. Skeleton minions will heal you for 0.5% of your total health per hit while being commanded. That is their specialty here, because this is how skill runes worked in Diablo 3. You take a skill and then you have 5 specializations to take. Bonus movement speed, bonus heal, doing weapon damage as poison damage, actually freezing opponents. So a big versatility on what these skeletons can actually do. And the interesting part being here that your minion lives doesn't matter at all, because the skeletons get summoned without corpses every 2 seconds again. So if one dies, one comes back. If one dies, one comes back. And you don't need corpses. That was a big problem in Diablo 2 with the Necromancer and the corpses, and it's also in Diablo 4, because you might get to the point where you actually want a corpse explosion or not resummon your minions, but if you're resummoning your minions, you're not doing damage, and then you get just stuck there resummoning your minions instead of actually playing your Necro. You just... But yeah, you're not really fighting. And here with that command skeleton, they just come. They just go. They're just there. And that's perfect. Why do I need to actually make a corpse into a skeleton? I can't just pull magically bones out of the ground or just make them appear. I mean, I'm a Necro, right? And then there was one thing that actually saddened me, and that was the second summoner skill, and that is Skeletal Mages. And I was confused at first, because raise a skeleton from the ground to attack your foes, dealing weapon damage as physical over 2 attacks, lasts 8 seconds. So the mage is not permanent. And I was like, oh man, that's kind of stupid. I want my mages to run around with me. Until I finally noticed that that really doesn't matter, because instead of having them permanent, you can just summon as many as you want. So if I have a lot of essence, 200, I can just jam out a bunch of skeletons. Especially with Extended Servitude, increase the duration of your skeleton mage and revive minions by 25%. So that's them then longer there as well. Plus, you can do your mages leaving corpses behind when they die. Poison damage on your mages. Instead of mages, they're archers, which increase your attack speed. Or you could blast all your essence away and summon one big skeleton. And then this was mages cost 10% of my life, but they're 2 seconds longer. And then I also picked up a legendary, very early, Circle of Neiluis Evil. I don't know how to say that correct. You now raise an additional skeletal mage with each cast, and they last an additional 3 seconds. What? Yes. These two things together is already better than anything skeletal mage wise than what Diablo 4 has to offer. Especially since your skeletal mages do immense damage, like incredible crazy damage. They scale off your weapon damage. So they deal 400% of your weapon damage as physical damage. That means the better my weapon is, the beefier, the more damage my weapon deals. Two-handed weapon, yes? The more damage they deal, and not some weird, they get like percentage of my damage as a something, and then I have to have multipliers, and then the Hellbent Commander, if they're standing close to me, they're doing, no, just straight up weapon damage into damage, done. Now, my favorite topic, the Golem. And it's so interesting because in Diablo 4, it's completely useless, always gets sacrificed. Here, it's nigh unkillable. The Golem also can be launched to be turned into 8 corpses. Looks like this. So you essentially engage with this, launch it in, and then corpse explosion, corpse explosion, corpse explosion. I mean, seriously, corpse explosion. This is, by the way, the homing corpse explosion. And yes, that's just a skill and doesn't need a unique item. We'll talk about it in a second. Now, the Golem hasn't been with me from the very beginning, unquestionable, and it can be turned into an Ice Golem, Bone Golem, where he pulls everything together, a Decay Golem, where he eats corpses to get continuously stronger, and then a Blood Golem, which heals you and also does 10 rolls to damage. And that sounds very similar to the Blood Golem that you actually have in D4. That also reduces your damage taken, and then it can heal itself, while it does damage to the others, just that the scaling is completely weird. Yeah. Here, the Golem just does a simple, again, 450% of my weapon damage is physical damage. No dilly-dally, no hissle-hassle, no bingo-bongo. Simple. And then on top of all of this, there's another amazing summon ability, which is called Revive. Target an area reviving up to 10 corpses within 20 yards for 20 seconds. Revived minions degenerate back into a usable corpse at the end of their duration. Yes, that is the purgatory. You could also have them do more damage, but they last only 12 seconds, but the damage is cold. Then you increase their damage, but each revive now costs 3% of health. Or when you revive a corpse, enemies within 20 yards run away. Everything possible. And that revive really gives you this army of the dead vibe. I'm essentially running around, my Golem with me, my mages I can summon when I need them, my skeletons I can yeet in, so I'm not using a single core skill, because my core skill in this case is actually summoning mages. I'm not throwing a bone spear. No, I have the mage equivalent of a bone spear. They do even more damage as I'm actually buffing my summoning damage. So I'm making sure that my minions do the most damage possible. And that's interesting because why would I want to use a bone spear or a blight skill when I could also summon mages with a core skill that are then as strong as a core skill? Plus that now with the revive, really army, and you can keep this up consistently. So if there's ever enough corpses, you have a 10 bonus minions running around with you, then you have your 7 skeletons, that's 17, and as many mages as I want, which is often also 10 to 12. You feel like the center of awesomeness surrounded by everyone. That's super cool. There's one more skill we also have in Diablo 4. It's called Army of the Dead. Army of the Dead in Diablo 4 summons like some skeletons that run around, explode, and they can leave behind corpses, right? But what happens here is Army of the Dead raise a massive skeletal army to pummel the targeted location, dealing 12,000 weapon damage as physical in a 15-yard radius. And the way it looks is you simply use your Army of the Dead here, and it destroys a location. And that is something that the Army of the Dead currently doesn't do. I mean, if you're versus a boss and you summon the Army of the Dead, then everything just kind of homes in on him, right? But if you're kind of in a dungeon and your minions just target everyone like randomly everywhere on the map, but you can't like target everything. I mean, we have the corpse tendrils to pull together, but then the Army of the Dead can't like target things. Let's wait for the cooldown to show you the specialties of this. There's also Land of the Dead. All corpse skills can be used at will for 10 seconds. You know, like the mage spell where the mage can just spam lightning skills like crazy. And the intriguing part is you can also, your skills do not cost a resource while Land of the Dead is active. So technically I can activate Land of the Dead, and for 10 seconds I can summon as many skeletal mages as I want to then really raise an army of skeletal mages to just pummel the boss. Or you're healed for 2% of your maximum life whenever you kill an enemy while Land of the Dead is active. You can enhance the duration. Enemies in Land of the Dead suffer 100% weapon damage as poison each second. This is the true Necro ultimate. I mean, just take Callan's Addict out that currently gives us any kind of attack speed and make Land of the Dead trigger every 30 seconds or something like this, or give it a conditional value when it triggers. But then you could just spam some actual skeleton skills. I mean, we have no skeleton skills to spam, right? We don't even have a command, but if we had some skeleton skills, that would be Cool. Now, Army of the Dead also. Skeleton Hands raised from the ground, damaging enemies within 15 yards for weapon damage as poison. Lasts 5 seconds. Yeah. So instead of going together, you also have damage over time as poison. The Skeleton Army knocks all affected enemies towards the center. So pulling everything together on top of this. Skeletons will rise from the ground and attack random targets for 50,000 total weapon damage. And that is the one they essentially just choose for Diablo 4. Of all of these, that's the one they choose for Diablo 4. Frozen Army, they go too cold. Where Dead Storm raises Storm of the Dead that surrounds you, damaging enemies for 15 weapon damage as physical over 5 seconds. Yes, that's the Bone Storm. So the Army of the Dead got turned into the Army of the Dead with unconventional warfare, and the Dead Storm get actually then turned into the Bone Storm. And technically, the Blighted Grass could also be the Blood Wave. But hey, this Army of the Dead is useful, and especially there's a set, if I'm not mistaken, that reduces the Army of the Dead cooldown whenever one of your minions attacks by 0.5 to 1 second, to then have the Army of the Dead cooldown be extremely low, as you can command your minions to go in, then they go frenzy, and attack a lot of things. On top of all of this, I'm currently using Bone Spikes, right, to generate essence. But technically, you don't actually need Bone Spikes to generate essence, because there is something called Dark Reaping. While using a Scythe, gain 2% essence and life per kill, which sounds kind of perfect for a Necro. Dark Reaping. I'm, Master of the Dead. I profit when things die. So now I get essence and life per kill as a passive. Not only that, there's something called Grisly Tribute. You are healed for 10% of your life on hit when one of your minions hits an enemy. So finally, a passive that helps me with the minions and doesn't punish me when I have minions. This is something that's completely missing in Diablo 4, because right now you summon minions, but there's no synergy, any big passive that really helps with that. Sure, you can give them a bit more attack speed, and you can also give them multiplicative more damage if you're standing close to them. The problem is, if you're standing close to your minions, you're also standing close to the enemies, and then you're getting hurt, and you have no way to protect yourself. Protecting yourself, you say, Pony? Yes, protecting yourself. Which brings us then to the beautiful Bone Armor. What Bone Armor? Yes, rip bones from nearby enemies, dealing 125% weapon damage as physical, and create armor that reduces damage taken by 3% per enemy hit up to a maximum of 10 enemies. Oh, so 10 enemies, 3% each? That sounds pretty damn good. Also, it actually does damage. Plus now, Bone Armor also increases your movement speed. Your armor absorbs all incoming damage and grants immunity to all control impairing effects, but only lasts for 5 seconds. Enemies hit are also stunned for 2 seconds. Increase the damage dealt, which is not necessary, and then increases your life per second by 10% per target hit. So I get 20% health damage, but I will heal tremendously as well while I have the Bone Armor active. A true, actually cool defensive ability, kinda. And something that I really wish Diablo 4 had was Simulacrum. Simulacrum creates a Simulacrum made of blood that will duplicate your secondary skill for 15 seconds. Imagine that going on in Diablo 4 right now, being able to make a blood clone of yourself that also runs around in blood surges or blood lances. So that would really solve some of the boss fighting issues. It could just be you and your boy running around. You and your happy blood clone going do 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 do. Very good. Now we've been talking a lot about Summoner, but one complaint I also had about the D4 Necro is not having any kind of poison ability. And that's where Death Nova comes in. Yes, Death Nova. Unleash a Nova that deals weapon damage as poison to all enemies within yards. That one can also blight. That can be turned into bone, into blood, into tendrils, and into unstoppable compound. And for some reason, I think, again, the Death Nova just is now a tendril, corpse tendrils, you know? The more I look at the Diablo 3 concept, the more I notice they just simply took this. My Bone Spear also has teeth, where it then also breaks away into teeth, or shatter, where it detonates, you know? And the first enemy hit dealing weapon damage and physical to all enemies in the yard. So they kind of took the Bone Spear, and that's the Bone Spear Splinters. The Death Nova is kind of tendrils, and for some reason it also got turned into Blood Nova, Blood Surge. But they kind of forget, they took some of these skills, but they kind of forget to make more out of this. They're like, okay, Death Nova is now Corpse Tendrils, but instead of then also making another one, an actual Blight skill, they kind of forget that, huh? Now, what could D4 do in any way to kind of capitalize from this, to turn the Necro around without having to break the game, to break the balance, to having release an expansion or something. And the reality is it's gonna be harsh, but alone skeletons being able to be summoned from non-corpses would go a long way. And right now we have this kind of skeletal priest to buff our minions as an ability instead of command skeletons. Remove that skeletal priest or put it as a standard passive. So skeletons raise from the ground every 8 seconds. And if you have a maximum number of skeletons, the skeleton priest comes to heal. That's just what it is. Put it in the skill tree that you have to put another point to activate this. Fantastic. Instead of the skeletal priest bonus heal that we have in the skill tree, just make it a skill to invest in. And then make the skeletons be commandable. Make them rush in to attack. Bonus damage. So I can launch them at something actively to also get a slight damage burst as a real ability, and not as just like, I can heal my minions. Because if my minions are full HP'd, or if they die instantly, the heal is completely useless at any time. 90% of the time, the priest is just useless. It gives a slight little damage boost, but with a damage boost even worth it? You want to command them, you want to launch them at something. That would go a long way, making skeletons better. Also, the mages, they could get launched into it. I mean, I have to say that I've been falling deep in love with the skeleton mage skill here right now. I would prefer this as a core skill, as a summoning core skill, because right now we do not have a summoning core skill. We have like Bone Spear, Blight, Blood Nova, Blood Surge, Spear, everything, all these kind of things, but we don't have a summoning core skill. And that's where the mages really came nicely in, that I do feel like a summoner because I can actively get more magical ghosts that shoot things out. Because that's the cool thing, that the skeleton mages are kind of like these magical specters formed out of magic to then aid you, which was really intriguing. But making that into a core skill is already a bit harsher. So that's something I don't expect them to do in any way. Now, adding another skill though, back there where we have Corpse Tendrils and Bone Spirit right now, because that's it, chat. With Corpse Tendrils and Bone Spirit, and you only play Corpse Tendrils, you never play Bone Spirit. So this is the big thingy they're actually giving us. Which means now, in order to really go to the next level, we need another skill there. And that skill needs to be Death Nova. And that Death Nova needs to then be able to be turned into either, needs to be Blight by nature and be turned into Blood, or be Blood by nature, call it Blood Nova, and then you can turn it into Blight or Bone. Because that would give us then another skill to kind of use that has a versatility that would then work with more builds to then, instead of just playing Corpse Tendrils, give us an option of something different that could be added without upsetting the balance of everything way too much. And then we obviously have to talk about Callan's Addict, which is like this absolute sadness of a skill which hires the attack speed slightly of our minions. But if Callan Addict would actually heal us consistently on minion damage, that will make sure that you're not suffering from having minions. So even if your minions get ignored and they don't taunt and you get attacked by the opponent, then you're kind of like, you're getting at least healed, right? They give you some kind of buff, which is great. All in all, Diablo 3 does it better than D2. Yes, D2 was fantastic, but the missing corpse mechanic was kind of like sad. And it allows still for various playstyle that is super fun. And I'm just simply asking myself, how could you screw it up so much if you have the blueprint of 2 amazing games? I mean, they tried to copy the homework, but they tried to not make it too obvious. I see that now as I go through the skills. They really just looked at this and they choose for some reason the worst options. I mean, they made the corpse explosion into Blight. We have that here. They made the corpse explosion have a bigger radius, and then the corpse explosion do more damage. They completely forget maybe corpse explosion is now a shrapnel where he causes like bonus bones to explode out, or a corpse explosion pulls themselves towards the nearest opponent. Because this is the thing. This is the homing corpse explosion. Yeah, like you don't need a unique for this, guys. It's the homing corpse explosion right here. Costs life now per cast, but at least you have it. So they tried to copy the homework, but they did it so bad that it's just sad. I don't expect any of this to happen anytime soon. Maybe season 4 or 5 or next year at the end of the year with the expansion. But there is the blueprint, there is the knowledge, there's the things. Please, like, just reach out to Blizzard, write them an email. Let's have an interview with their Necro class designer and just break it down to me what went wrong? How can we, as the community, with Blizzard together, maybe work to make this better? How can I, as a creator, maybe help? I mean, I'd do it for free, Blizzard. If you want to, I'll just quit streaming and I'll work for free with you for a couple of months so we can come up with a betterment to the Necro. Please. I'm not claiming I'm the smartest man in the world, but when whoever made this class concept, he needs help. Now, if you also want to see the Diablo 2 Necro compared to the D4 one that's here, or the full D3 playthrough, enjoy.